Hi guys, this is a casual fan. So Carlos Sainz ended the unbeaten run for both Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and now we have a new team as a race winner in 2023. Yes, Ferrari did that. Who would have predicted that out of all the teams it would be Ferrari that would end Red Bull's unbeaten run? Well, this has happened. Well, if you want to know more about how the race went and how I feel about it, well, I did an instant reaction. It's there on the channel. You can take a look. This video is not about that. This video is entirely about the drivers and how the 20 drivers fared during the Singapore Grand Prix. So let's get straight to it. Let's rate these 20 drivers on how they fared during the Singapore Grand Prix. First of all, let's begin with Red Bull and let's take a look at Max Verstappen. Not talking about Max, I think he was a bit taken aback by how uncompetitive Red Bull was. He did throw his toys out of the pram a bit during qualifying. He was not totally focused, a bit distracted as well. That did lead to a bit of a probably a bit of a disappointing performance in qualifying. He should not have been out qualified by Liam Lawson for sure. That was not the best lap from Max. However, in race, I think by the time Sunday came around, he was a bit more pragmatic. He understood that maybe this time around Red Bull is not going to win. So he was a bit more measured throughout the race, and yeah, a brilliant recovery. I think it was a bit of a surprise that he was able to finish P5. I did not think that was possible at one point in the race, but yes, he got it done. So decent weekend. Again, the 10 race win streak is done now, and for this weekend, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10 because overall it was not the best from his side. Now talking about Sergio Perez, I think overall Sergio's weekend in terms of qualifying, he was a bit slower than Max. In the race, again, he was a bit less impressive than Max. But one area where he gets dogged a few points is, well, you can't have too many incidents. You can't ultimately lead to a compromised race for Yuki Tsunoda as well as Alex Albon. That's just not done. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Next up, we have Ferrari. And first of all, let's talk about Charles Leclerc. Now talking about Charles, I think this is one of the rare weekends where I've seen Charles get completely outclassed by a teammate. This I haven't seen that happen too often, especially by his teammate or someone who's driving the same car. But that was the case this time around. Throughout the weekend, even in free practice and in qualifying, you could see that Charles was not entirely comfortable with the car. Then in the race, he was out qualified. Sainz did the better lap, and even if you're finishing more than 20 seconds behind your teammate, and when both of you are on the same strategy, something's wrong, something's not clicking, and Charles really needs to look back at this weekend and how he performed, because this is just not the level or the standards at which he's used to performing. In terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Next up, we have Carlos Sainz, and well, in my view, arguably he was the driver of the weekend. Everything was perfect. He started the weekend on top, he ended it on top. From the free practice session, you could see he was the more comfortable Ferrari driver, and even when it mattered in qualifying, he put together the perfect lap. It was no one else, no, neither the Mercedes of George Russell or the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Nobody could challenge him. And even in the race, being so measured, being so smart, and having that kind of a guile that he was able to keep Lando Norris in the DRS zone so that he could ultimately protect himself. That is the kind of trait you see from a world champion, to be honest, and from elite drivers. So great presence of mind, and in my view, a perfect weekend that yields a rating of 10 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Next up, we have Lewis Hamilton, and well, in my view, he was completely outclassed in qualifying, being half a second slower than George Russell. It does not make sense. You should not have such a gulf with your teammate, especially when you're such a class driver like Lewis is. So yes, qualifying kind of put him on the back foot. Then the start was a bit dubious, to say the least. But again, he recovered well. He made up a few positions. In the end, he got a podium. Slightly lucky that George crashed out. But overall, a good weekend, but maybe a weekend that should be a bit concerning because Russell is able to extract a bit more from Mercedes at this stage. Overall, a weekend where he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10. Now, talking about George Russell, and I think it's so hard to rate how George Russell's weekend was because in terms of performance, pretty much from FP1 until the last lap of Singapore Grand Prix, he was spectacular. His qualifying lap was very impressive because to pull off such a gap to his teammate is unprecedented. You don't do that to Lewis Hamilton, yet he was able to get that done. Even in the race, he was determined to make a race out of it and to challenge for the win, and he tried his all. In the end, he overshot the limit, and that crash is, let's face it, it's unacceptable for a driver who wants to challenge for a championship. You should not be crashing out on the last lap. That was a foolish mistake. So yes, if he had not made that mistake, I would have given him a rating of 9. probably maybe 9.5 as well, because he was very impressive. But here he gets a rating of 7 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he had. Next up, we have Esteban Ocon. Now, talking about Esteban Ocon, I think he had a very solid weekend. His qualifying was very impressive. He made it to Q3 while his teammate could not. Even in the race, those overtakes on Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez, they were quite impressive, and they showed a great racing acumen that you don't see often, especially on such a track. Again, he was very unlucky with the reliability issue. Alpine needs to sort itself out, honestly. A top 6 result was possible for Ocon, but he goes home on his birthday, by the way, with no points. Anyways, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 8 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he put together. Next up, we have Pierre Gasly, and the qualifying was a bit underwhelming. The thing is, throughout the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, he was maybe a step behind Esteban Ocon when it comes to overall performance. It kinds of ebbs and flows between the two, and that shows how impressive both the drivers are. In the race, he made a strong recovery, and a top 6 result is good. And in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he was able to put together. Next up, we have Lando Norris, and I think under the radar, it was a very impressive performance because all the spotlight was on the Ferraris or even the Mercedes. In between all of these, Lando Norris just kept pegging away, and he came home second in the race, which was very, very impressive. He held off Russell as well as Lewis, and I think he maximized whatever he could. The McLaren was not the fastest car around Singapore. It was not even the second fastest. I think that goes to both the Mercedes and the Ferrari. Even then, being able to secure a podium and a P2 finish is very impressive. In terms of rating, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, talking about Oscar Piastri, the qualifying, even though Oscar continues to claim that he would have been able to make it to Q2 with the kind of lap that he was putting together until Stroll crashed, I have my doubts because he had a poor second sector, and there is a high probability that he would not have been able to make it. Regardless, he should not have been in that position anyways. So a poor qualifying in my view. In the race, a strong recovery drive. He recovered from P17 to P7, which is very impressive. Good racecraft overall, and he gets a rating of 7 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Next up, we have Alfa Romeo, and first of all, let's talk about Valtteri Bottas. Now, not much to say for Valtteri. He was severely limited by the car that he had under him. Overall, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10, but it's hard to see how well or how badly he performed because there wasn't much to speak of in qualifying, and in the race, he suffered a very early DNF. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10, but not much to speak of, to be honest. Now moving on to Zhou Guanyu, and now first of all, congratulations to him for extending his contract with Sauber. In terms of performance, he was slower than Valtteri, and that's about it. You really can't say more than that. In the race, he was a bit anonymous. He finished P12, which was a result of a strong two-stopper strategy that was put together. Again, not much to speak. Both drivers are somewhat limited by the car, so in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 5.5 out of 10 for Singapore Grand Prix. Now let's talk about Aston Martin, and first of all, let's talk about Fernando Alonso. Now, in my view, I do think his qualifying lap was not up to the mark. He should not have been this far off, and he should not have been out-qualified by a Haas. It just does not make sense. So, a poor qualifying session overall, that he was starting so far down the grid. After that, the race he was pretty much watching his mirror throughout the time. Apparently, he had some damage on the car, but getting overtaken by Ocon must have hurt. These two drivers don't really like each other, and the manner in which Ocon was able to overtake Alonso, it takes a lot of credit and it takes a lot of skill to get that done. Yeah, not the best weekend. He was a bit off, and in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 4 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he was able to put together in Singapore. Next up, talking about Lance Stroll, and yeah, not much to say. I don't think he should be driving the Aston Martin, but apparently he will continue to do so. A poor qualifying, he would have been P20 once again. He was not making improvements. He was not going to reach Q2, and yeah, didn't race even. So yeah, what can we rate? He gets a rating of 2 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Next up, let's talk about Haas, and first of all, let's talk about Nico Hülkenberg. Now, decent qualifying. He was a step below Kevin Magnussen, who pulled off a stunning lap in Q3 and was P6, while Nico could not do that. In the race, he kept it steady. He was on course for points, but the strategy did not work out. Every driver that pitted again during the VSC was able to get the jump on him, and they were on two stoppers, so that kind of hurt him and his end result. Overall, a decent weekend. Maybe he would be a bit disappointed because his teammate scored a point and he did not. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Now talking about Kevin Magnussen, a very very impressive qualifying. For once, Magnussen was able to nail the qualifying session, and even in the race he got a point. But he was a bit lucky. The strategy worked for him, the two stopper, because earlier he had made a mistake and lost a ton of positions. So yes, a decent weekend and something he should be happy about. And in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Now let's talk about AlphaTauri, and first of all, let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda. Now, not much to say about Yuki because I don't think his weekend even started. His qualifying, he was blocked by the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. He could not get a lap together in the second attempt. Then in the race, he was, well, pretty much shunted out of the way by Sergio Perez, another Red Bull driver. So he has not much to speak about because his weekend never really started. He gets a rating of 5 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, talking about Liam Lawson and a very impressive weekend. I think Liam Lawson is making the most of two things right now. He's making the most of the fact that he has an opportunity to race in Formula One, and is also making the most of the fact that Tsunoda cannot get a weekend together for one reason or the other. In all of this, what Liam has shown that he does not make mistakes. He's very impressive, and getting into Q3 with an AlphaTauri, out qualifying Max, Sergio, that was something that would have impressed Helmut Marko. Overall, a strong weekend. He gets points. I think he also secured the best result for AlphaTauri. Everything is going to sting for Yuki. But yeah, in terms of rating, Lawson gets a rating of 8 out of 10. And he kind of deserves a seat in Formula 1. Now, talking about Williams, and first of all, let's talk about Alex Albon. Now, a decent weekend. He did whatever he could in that car. It was a decent qualifying. It was a decent race. The thing is, he would have scored points if he wasn't punted off by Sergio Perez. You can see a bit of a theme here, how many races Sergio has actually ruined. In terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10. An impressive weekend, a solid one. This is what you can actually do when the car is not really up to the mark. So yeah, good show all around from Alex Albon. Finally, talking about Logan Sargent, and not much really. Honestly, I can't really say much about it because there is no form reversal. The gap is still there. It continues to grow. He's not been able to nail a single weekend together, and we are in the 15th or 16th race weekend of the season. When that happens, the thing is, every race weekend, the only time we see Logan Sargent on our television is basically when he's making a mistake or is crashing out, and that is not a good sign for any upcoming driver. So something to work on, because I think he needs a strong performance after the kind of weekend that he put together in Singapore. In terms of rating, he gets a rating of 4 out of 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. So you can take a look at how the driver ratings look like for Singapore. As you can see, Carlos Sainz is arguably the driver of the day. He's the driver of the weekend as well. The Spaniard nailed everything. He was perfect. And I guess strong performance also from Lando Norris, Liam Lawson, and to an extent from Lewis Hamilton as well. Okay, so now that we've looked at the ratings of the Singapore Grand Prix, let's take a look how the cumulative ratings look after 15 races this season. So first of all, we have Max Verstappen on top. I think the surprises have to be how highly Lando Norris and Alex Albon rank. Lando is third now, and he's closing up with Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso has 7.79 cumulative, while Lando Norris has 7.71. So if Alonso does not put a weekend together in Suzuka, we might see a change in position. Alex Albon has also done an impressive job. He's fourth in the rankings. Also, take a look at how quickly Carlos Sainz is jumping up positions. He's now 8th in the rankings, while earlier there was a time when Carlos Sainz was not even in top 10. He has been very impressive in the second half of the season. What has been disappointing to see is where Sergio Perez ranks. He's 16th. Lance Stroll is 20th, which is just poor, to be honest. And also, Charles Leclerc is in 10th right now, and that is not where a driver of his caliber should be. So overall, these are the cumulative ratings as well as the ratings for the Singapore Grand Prix. What do you guys think? Do let me know in the comment section. Also, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.